Quite the unique time in history, a time that doesn't allow us to be together in person and to be festive and worship with one another. But I'm grateful that so many of us are staying home, staying safe, and in doing so, keeping each other safe. We are united in this effort and in this moment. I want to take this time to acknowledge and honor the sacrifices of those who work every day taking care of their communities in this time of need and uncertainty. The heroes who are making our daily lives possible. Let's continue to support them and each other. This is Hero. There's a hero. If you look inside your heart, you don't have to be afraid of what you are. There's an answer. You reach into your soul and the sorrow that you
This is Pastor A here with you guys, and I want to welcome you guys to P2P TV. This is our opportunity to where we come and give you some content that will be enjoyable and blessing to you and your entire family. And so we're blessed to have you on with us today. Do us a favor before we get started. Like this video, comment and share it. Start some watch parties if you're watching this on YouTube. Subscribe, whatever platform you're on. We're getting ready to have a very healthy dialogue, very important dialogue, and I'm blessed to be able to kind of just navigate this show today. The name of this show is called Heroes, those that are standing on the front line of COVID-19. We understand that this COVID-19 has impacted everybody. You name it, it's impacted directly or indirectly. However, there are some that have literally put their lives on the line to help us to maintain a spirit of normalcy, to help us to maintain a spirit of safety, and to keep us moving forward. There are some that are labeled as essential, and we're blessed to have several essential people with us on this broadcast. And so I want to introduce them. I'm going to start to the left of my screen. This young man is near and dear to my heart. He's like a son to me, a spiritual son, but he's not on really today in the spiritual aspect. He's on because he's also in law enforcement. He is Deputy McCord. He's with us tonight. Go ahead, Mr. McCord. Greet the people tonight.
How you doing? And thanks for having me on, Pastor, tonight in this capacity. Really looking forward to dialoguing with all of these heroes on here tonight.
And to the right, or maybe your left, young man I've been knowing pretty much all of my life. Was once our musician at our church, and God kind of elevated him. He's doing such great work in the area of music. But in his day-to-day, his 9 to 5, he's helping get those packages. You go doing all this ordering online because you can't get to the store. And this is one of the young men that is bringing those packages to your doorstep. I want you to welcome a friend and brother, Brother Kiotis Williams. Say hello to the people, Kiotis. I think your mic is. Go ahead. Go ahead. Your mic was muted. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate Pastor for introducing me, and I hope we have a healthy dialogue tonight, this evening. And thank you for all the heroes out there and those that are on the broadcast.
This next brother, what can we say about this? What can we say about this brother? He's a pastor. He's an author. And we may get to talk about some of that. But he's also on the front line as a firefighter. He's always on the front line in that capacity. But he's an essential worker in this field. Senior pastor of the Transformation Church in Goulds, Florida, about as far as down south as you can possibly get. But he's on the line with us, Pastor Xavier Jones. Would you greet the people tonight?
Thank you, Pastor, for having me. I'm so excited about this dialogue tonight. Definitely share my perspective, and so excited to be on this call with so many other heroes. We don't wear capes, but we're making sure we save the day.
Yes. And this last young lady, forgive her if she's a little touched. You had a Kojic movie that came out this weekend, and she's all the Kojics around the country in their feelings. They either looking for hats and brooches and stuff that Maddie Moss was wearing on this show. But she is a hero. She is a nurse practitioner. She is our spiritual neighbor. We kid each other all the time. But she's my girl. We're happy to have her on the line tonight with us from representing the health field. Go ahead, Ms. Robinson, introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. I appreciate you, Pastor A, for having me on, especially to give some insight during this very tumultuous time of COVID-19. I look forward and I'm honored to be here with the remainder of the individuals that are here to share in this insightful time. So thank you for having me on.
Awesome. Well, let's just get right to it. And Andrea, I'll start with you. COVID-19 hits the scene January, but right around February, late February, early March, we discovered that this is going to impact our lives forever. What was the first thought when you understood that this was a virus, a disease that was going to spread very quickly, and in a lot of cases, take a lot of people's lives? From a medical perspective, what are some things that had to be put in place from your perspective to help handle a crisis of this magnitude?
Actually, to be honest, Pastor A, we started seeing the influx of what we now know as COVID-19 back at the end of 2019. And we first saw it in the US around the end of October, beginning of November, and we started hearing little whispers about it. At that time, it had not actually been named COVID-19 or coronavirus. And so we just kind of thought it was a lot of flu symptoms. So people were dying from what we thought was the flu. And then bring it up to 2020, January, February, we start seeing a lot of people coming in with the same symptoms that were matching the ones that came back in November. So I think in the healthcare field, we started becoming very alarmed about the amount of people that we were getting coming into their emergency rooms, into the doctor's offices. I know that we started getting a lot of calls for direct admissions to come in for the same symptoms. And so as healthcare professionals, as we started to see this more and more, we started feeling like, okay, we need to do something. Hence the reason you started hearing about COVID-19 and coronavirus. And then you heard back in March about the pandemic outbreak that had started months before in Wuhan, China, which had made its way to the US. And as you said, has since that time taken many lives and has caused havoc in our country.
Pastor Jones, it's the first instinct to call 911. Just about anything, you call 911. Being in the fire department and the fire rescue area, what are some of the things that you guys noticed right away when people start to realize that COVID-19 had hit the scene, and again, what people thought was the flu now is something that could be deadly? What was the first thing that kind of happened in your line of work that you saw that was different than the norm?
Well, one of the big things is we needed to make sure that we had policy in place and things in place to make sure that our firefighters were going to be properly protected if they were responding on those calls, because eventually they're going to have to go back home to their families. In addition to that, we noticed that these type of calls were coming in, but it wasn't necessarily seen at that time as COVID. It just seemed like a common cold. I can't tell you that we actually that it was so severe that it caused us an alarm, because we look at the trends and things that are happening. I think people feel more comfortable with walking in the ER with a cold versus calling 911 with a cold. They call us when it's very, very bad. But when I heard this, the first thing I did think of is, how do we protect those firefighters that are on the field, those that are going to be responding to these calls every day? And then the second thing was, how do I protect myself and my family and the people that I lead? So with that, I paid very close attention to CDC to see what guidelines they put in place. We ended up canceling service. We were probably one of the very early. We didn't do the back and forth. It was just like, no, we're not even playing. We're not trying to figure this out if this is here or not. So those were some of the initial thoughts that came to my mind. And I agree with you that people do call 911 for everything. So when this came out, I'm like, we're calling for this.
Now, of course, and we're going to touch on some of the things you just mentioned, Pastor, but, so not long after, everybody, fast forwarding, is in the house. And so we in the house, you got cabin fever, you're going to eat and you're going to shop, right? That's what you're going to do. You're going to eat and you're going to shop. And so now we discover who's essential. And for a mail carrier or a package deliverer, you become, Keotis, essential. Again, we still don't know the extent on how this virus is contracted. And now mail carriers, delivery companies have to force themselves to interact with people on a daily basis. People have to sign packages. You cannot really avoid contact. How has that affected the way you operate and what you do?
Oh yeah, it's affected it greatly. What we had to start doing, even from the way that we get into work, we all come in 15-minute blocks now. When we go into work, everybody has to be masked up. Everybody has to be gloved up. They give us alcohol, hand sanitizer. We have to clean every part of our truck where we are going to be touching it with our hands. When we go out and we approach the public, of course, we have to walk around in a mask. And I do know as a nurse, it is difficult to walk around all day long with a mask on. And I have a greater respect because now I'm feeling it. And going up 3-4 flight stairs when there's no elevator with a mask on, it's pretty hard when you have apartment complexes. So at the end of the day, we still have to do our service where now we're minimizing contact. If there's a signature that needs to be provided, we have a protocol that we put COVID-19 on the package, on the board. Nobody can touch our board. Try to drop the package off, not walk 8 feet, wait till they get to the door, and we say, all right, hi, nice day, and we go on our way. When we're interacting, it's hard when you go to a commercial place where we have grocery stores. A lot of that now has become secured deliveries now. We have 2 people that come to our truck because I've had several instances where people have had to come up behind you to try to grab something in the truck. And so we have people now coming to make sure that they have protection when that delivery goes into those places, like when we're delivering water, delivering toilet tissue, and delivering other essentials that is needed. And we all know that everybody's been fighting for those things. But one of the major things that is really affected, that I've seen as an effect out there, is all of the cars that are in everybody's house. Everybody is home. So our deliveries have gone up. We have gotten everything from dry goods to frozen food that we have been delivering right now because you just cannot get it in the store anymore. Baby food, hand sanitizers, anything that's dealing with cleansers, we are delivering everything now. And people are tracking us. So they're outside at the door when they know we're pulling up because they have an app to track us. So they meet us out there. A lot of people have been great and been wonderful. You got some people that really, we're masked up, we're gloved up. They want you to be right there by the end of the driveway and drive off. They don't even want to come near the sidewalk. So it's been a little bit of a challenge. As far as my other company with SIVA, with Williams Logistics, I have a couple of tractor trailers that are out there that I have guys that are working. I make sure that they are masked up. I make sure that they have their gloves. And when they go out, I make sure that, listen, hey, one of you go stay in the truck. One of you go out and get what you need. Don't both of you go out at the same time. Stay your distance. Make sure that you are washing your hands. Make sure that you're staying cleansed up because those we're delivering test kits as well to various places. So they definitely need that equipment, and it's you can't say no. I can't take the load. You have to take the load, and you have to get it there.
Right. And we're going to get back to the trucking in a moment. We know, of course, everybody's supposed to stay in the house. It does not stop crime. People are still going to capitalize on this opportunity to commit crime. And so, Deputy, explain to us, how has police work changed in this season? I mean, you're a cop, but you're human. Which, if criminals don't like to get caught, last time I checked, and so they're not going to they're going to resist arrest. How has all of that changed in this season?
Well, it has changed slightly, but not a ton. Unfortunately, even with all the staying in the house and everything, crime is still occurring, and some days I feel like it's even more than before all this. But some measures have been taken as far as what police officers and deputies are responding to. Certain things that aren't necessarily emergencies, things that can be handled over the phone. Policies and things that are put in place for them to do that instead of going to make contact with people. Now, obviously, there's some situations that you just can't avoid contact. If it's something violent in nature or something that deputies or police officers have to go to, then you just have to go. We've been given masks, and we've always had gloves and protective suits and things like that. So measures have been taken to stay safe, but the job still has to get done. If someone's injured, if someone's hurt, if something violent has happened, we still have to go. We still have to go and investigate. We still have to go to the scene. We still have to go in people's houses. People still have to be arrested. You still got to touch people. Social distancing is really impossible when you're arresting someone.
You can arrest virtually. You can't
throw the cup at them and say, "Put these on for me." It's not going to work like that. So there has been some slight changes in how we go about things, just taking the extra precaution and just minimizing contact. But some contact is just going to happen in this line of work. And there are some instances, myself being in the detective bureau now, dealing with violent crimes and things like that. Victims are at the hospital. You got to go in the hospitals. You got to get statements. You got to talk to people. I've been in the hospital several times since this has come about. With masks and gloves and goggles and all those things. Still have to go in people's houses. So the job continues. We can't. It's not a profession where you can say, "Oh, I'm just not going to go. We're just not going to do it," because it still has to get done, and you're expected to do it at the same level. So it has changed in some minor ways as far as the protective measures that are being taken, but for the most part, a lot of it is still the same as far as the job that we have to do.
And again, guys, you can ask us questions if we can answer them. If any of our panelists can answer, we see that our online audience is growing. Thank you all so much. Please feel free to send comments or questions and just, shout outs, even if it's, thank yous. These men and women would love to hear that. Pastor Jones, you said something because you have a perspective of you saw some things coming. So there was a big debate, and I'm gonna kind of tell you to put your pastor hat on in a moment. There was a big debate as to how the church should handle this situation. You said because of your expertise, you shut the church down from meeting, gathering very quickly. What was your decision behind that? And what would you say to those that may have questioned that decision at the time?
Right. So for me, number one, it wasn't a question of my faith. It wasn't, do I believe God? Do I not believe God? I believe God and I believe science. And I believe that science doesn't defy God. It actually helps prove God. So with that being said, what I did was I canceled services. It's amazing because God is so amazing, because months earlier, he tells me, you need to go ahead and get that camera system working. And I'm saying to myself, like, I don't want to do this. I'm too shy. This ain't right. The lighting ain't right. This person ain't going to do it. All of these excuses. So this kind of speeded up that process. We bought the system in December and had to end up deploying it in March. So my reasoning for canceling that service early is because I love the people that I pastor. And I believe that the people that I pastor actually values me and value my decision making. How can I be in one place making policy, telling people to not social distance, and I, on the other hand, am putting people in an environment where they are not social distancing? So we minimize the number of people, not just to meet the number, but to meet the exposure. I wanted to make sure that if we're going to have people here, let's bring the strong people, let's bring the young people, let's let our elderly people stay at home. We will find a way to minister to them. So I did everything that I could do to make sure that my people were safe. And that was the reason that I made that decision early on.
Now, Nurse Robinson, there have been a lot of myths. We've heard, everybody's a doctor now, everybody's a scientist now, everybody has an opinion. We've heard a lot of myths. We know some of them are partially true about who can contract it, who's more susceptible. When we started off, it was just elderly. I mean, it was a culture myth going around saying black folk can't get it. All of these myths. Explain how all of those myths have been defied, and you've seen people from every walks of life, young, old, black, white. Explain those things and how that kind of makes you laugh when you're behind the scenes hearing people say things like this.
Well, I think initially it was just the elderly that we were seeing die from it. But as it became more and more prevalent, it was just being passed from the young people to the older people, middle age, and we've even had babies to die from COVID-19. It's
Wow.
not a age that is subjected to COVID-19. It's not a sex, it's not a race. It is a disease. And just like any other disease, it is passed through airborne contact, droplet contact. So if a young person comes in contact with it, they don't get the proper or quick enough treatment, they will succumb to the disease. And it is shown that they will succumb quicker if they have those other comorbidities, such as asthma, COPD, emphysema, heart disease, kidney disease. And the reason that happens is because your body is not equipped enough to fight off this illness. That is why it is so important for us as a body of believers, as a body of individuals, to take care of our temples. Not just because COVID-19 is here, to take care of it so that in the event the next disease comes along, our bodies are able to fight it off. And that's kind of one of the things that I kind of champion myself from my family. I don't want us to get into the place where we can't fight something off. Yes, I am a nurse, but that doesn't make me, any different from anyone else. There are many nurses, many doctors, many healthcare professionals that have succumbed to this disease because their body could not fight it off. It is something that we should be able to fight off, but when we have other illnesses or we don't treat our bodies right, we can't. So it's not something that's just affecting the elderly, because we have a lot of young people whose bodies are not healthy. We have a lot of middle-aged people who didn't do the proper things during their youth. So that's why it's important for us as parents. And even I hear we have a couple of pastors and whatnot on the panel.
Oh boy, here she goes, Jones. Here she go.
Even bringing nutrition and different topics into our congregation. I am also a faith community nurse. I do a lot of workshops. I talk about things like mental illness in the church because, believe it or not, mental illness is rearing its head because people are not stable enough to deal with the outcomes of COVID-19. So we're seeing increase in child abuse, domestic violence, suicides, because they are not capable to mentally handle the things that are coming along with COVID-19. So we have to be health conscious at all times, especially during this pandemic. So taking your vitamins, making sure you're hydrated, getting proper rest. We're complaining about being quarantined, but maybe this is what your body needs to not be able to succumb to COVID-19. Maybe we haven't been resting enough because we're going and going and going. I mean, I had to talk with my husband
Oh Lord,
about
don't
making
let me.
sure, as Pastor Jones said, we had to look out for our congregation. My husband is a preacher. We had to look out for our congregation. We have a lot of elderly individuals in our congregation, some that have these comorbid diseases. And I was not willing to take that chance on their life. It wasn't about, as you said, not having faith. It wasn't about not having faith. I have great faith because, believe it or not, as healthcare professionals, we've dealt with things like this before. We've been wearing masks and gowns and gloves and face shields for a very long time. I've been in this profession for almost 19 years now, but it takes a lot more now because we are not doing what we're supposed to be doing to make sure we don't come in contact with COVID-19. We still have people that are not practicing social distancing. I mean, look at social media. They're having parties for Easter with hundreds of people. Why would we do that? I mean, when we have an illness that is so highly contagious and highly contractable, why would you even put yourself in the situation where you could potentially contract? And even if, and that's the other thing I wanted to say, because some people think, oh, I can't get it. This won't happen to me. You may actually have COVID-19 or coronavirus or the Rona, as some people are calling it, and you may not know it. And you go visit your grandmother, your aunt, your cousin, you go and see the newborn baby that your sister just had, and you don't know that you have it, and you just spread it to them. So we have to be careful when we are saying, oh, I'm not going to practice social distancing, because it may not be your life that you're saving. It may be the next person's life. So it's important. It is very important for us to follow, we want to get biblical. The Bible says we got to follow the laws of the land.
Wow.
So it's not just about, I don't want to do what they're telling me to do. I want to see my friends and family. Well, if you don't obey the laws, you may not make it through this pandemic to see your friends and family when this is all over. So I implore you guys, take it serious. This is not a joke. It's not a joke. I get nervous every time I have to deal with another patient. If they cough wrong, even in a mask or a gown, I'm looking cross-eyed at them like, hey, whoa.
Welcome to my house. I think that's I think I got a rule. If you cough, I'm trying to remember. If you cough once, wash your hands. Cough twice, take a bath. Cough 3 times, get out. I think that's the rule of the house. But she mentioned, and you talked about, we've all talked about guys in your profession can't social distance themselves. Be just in the line of work. It's just very difficult. You have a wife and 3 children, one, 6 months old. Psychologically, when you leave the house, knowing how many people you're going to come in contact with, you don't know if they're practicing social distancing. You don't know if they've been wearing masks when they go out. What goes through your mind when you get up and go to work in the morning now versus this is something you've been doing, almost 20 years. What has changed psychologically for you?
Well, I'm terrified when I get up and go to work. Of course, you can do everything within your power to make sure that you protect yourself and others. Um, just quite eloquently, as Andrew has talked about, a lot of people are not practicing social distancing. You have people that'll walk up to you and just think that it's just a regular Monday, and not understanding that you have to distance yourself. And then I get quite offended, and I do tell them, I said, sorry, you're gonna have to step back a little bit and just try to let them know that I'm not trying to be rude, but I have so much to lose bringing anything home with me. My wife had um, a very hard birth last year, and she was her immune system is still trying to build back up from that. I have a 7-month old, I have a 9-year old, I have a 11-year old. So those things, I would be terrified if I was to bring anything home. So on my way to work, I'm just praying. I'm more conscious about where I step, who I'm around. I wait for clearance of people to go by before I approach a store or before I approach an office building where there are people there. If somebody is coming to the door, make sure I get eye contact with them. I leave the package down on the floor for them. I say, have a great day, and I go about my day. So, it's kind of like you're trying to dodge the raindrops and deliver at the same time. Is very difficult. But at the end of the day, when preventative measures I do, and I know that even from work, going into work, it's hard to distance yourself from people. So when I come home, I have my routine when I go through the garage. I make sure that I bring any of my work clothes into the house with me. I go, and now my bathroom downstairs, as soon as I open the door, it's become my quarantine place. So nobody uses that bathroom. I'm the only one that showers in that bathroom. I'm the only one that uses that bathroom. And I make sure that I'm in there for like about 30, 45 minutes before I come out. So I'm making sure that I do all of the things in my power not to contract anything past that door. And then, of course, clean up behind yourself after that. But it's very hard. It's very frightful. You do worry about getting sick. Family members that have gotten sick, and I have family members that are in the health field that have gotten sick. And it's very hard to not go see them, but you can't go see them. I can't even go see my mother at the moment because she is over 70, and I don't want her to contract anything that I have. So that's why I thank God for FaceTime. Thank God for the technology where you're able to still reach them and not be able to be presently there with them.
Pastor Jones, you've been very vocal about this recently. Some things that have kind of hit home with you. You mind sharing that story and how this is, this COVID-19 has kind of really impacted you and what you've learned from it?
Right. Well, the first thing I want to do is definitely acknowledge what he just said. And I strongly urge anybody that works in any capacity, that works around people or deal with people, whether you're working at the grocery store, use that process that he's using, where you go to the garage or take your stuff off before you come in contact with your family. That is amazing. I mean, usually that's something that is taught to healthcare providers, but I believe in this case, if you are an essential worker and you are a part of helping anybody in any capacity, use that. Take your stuff off before you go in your home, put it straight in the washing machine, wash and spray off your shoes. To answer your question, so I was diagnosed on Friday with COVID-19, and I ended up just going to get tested. I was sick a few weeks ago, and when I went to get tested, they said, yeah, it's a sinus infection. So there was a antibody test that came out. So I'm like, let me just take this test just because. Obviously, like Robinson was saying, apparently this was going on for a while, and it was just seen as sinus infections, cold, flu, and all of that. They tested for the regular coronavirus at the time that I was sick, and it came back. Everything came back negative. They gave me antibiotics. Says a sinus infection. I took the antibiotics. The symptoms went away. So I'm like, awesome, great. I feel good. When I checked the antibody test, which happens to be a week, 2 weeks away or so, it came back positive. Antibodies basically said that my body was fighting a form of the coronavirus, the COVID-19. So I spoke to my doctor, and I'm like, hey, this thing came back. Do you think I had it? And he's like, I don't know, the tests weren't out there, but just go and take the real test to see if you have it. And I happened to go and take the real test, and it showed positive. So he believes that the worst of it is over, but I just urge people to help you understand that coronavirus or COVID-19 doesn't have a look, doesn't have a face, doesn't have a social economical standard. It does not discriminate, and it will be a part of everyone. So for me, what it has done, it has made me really, really challenge those asymptomatic people, the people that's not showing any signs. Like, you can hear it and say, yeah, the news is just talking, but this is real. I have no symptoms other than a little cough. And you would look at me and you would say, oh, he's strong, everything's good, there's no way. But COVID-19, I tested positive for it. So I say that to strongly urge people, don't go off the look, don't go off just the cough. The cough is important, but there are other things that could be going on underlining. And if that person is strong, they're not going to show signs, but they can transmit the virus. So I'm grateful out of all of this that I maintained social distancing. When I went to my dad's house, he would sit on the porch and I would sit out in the yard. And he's looking at me like, why are you sitting that far away? I'm like, just in case. And thank God, because he's almost 80. That would have devastated me had I known that I went close to him and impacted him in that way.
Pastor John, you said something very critical just then about asymptomatic people and people that are showing different signs. When this first came out, it was the cough and the fever, and that's what people were looking for when they were looking for signs and symptoms of COVID-19. But as this has evolved, we have found that it is more than a cough. It's more than a fever. Some people are coming in, never had a fever at all. They're having GI symptoms, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and they're testing positive for COVID-19. They're having other symptoms, like you said, symptoms of sinus infections and things like that, things that you would not even equate with COVID-19. I was reading an article today, and I think it was in the New England Journal of Medicine, and they were saying that they are now seeing neurological signs and symptoms. So they're seeing delirium, confusion. So we cannot just say, oh, if I don't have a cough, if I don't have a fever, it's possible, it's likely that I don't have it. We have no idea. And that is why social distancing is a key factor in diminishing the curve of this pandemic at this time.
Ms. McCoy, I want to ask you a question. This is tough on law enforcement. We understand. Someone made a comment earlier about enforcing the social distancing. From a law enforcement perspective, how tough is it to see people not practicing this, knowing the severity of it, and really from a, I guess, legal perspective, really not being able to do anything about it? How, do you think that that may progressively change if the curve does not start to go down? Do you think some further steps need to be taken in order to seriously enforce this social distancing? I'm sorry, your mic is muted.
Okay, there.
Okay, go ahead.
It is definitely tough to see, because many of us, I'm sure all of us in some capacity, we want to help people. And whenever you see people that are not helping themselves or putting themselves in harm's way, you want to do something about it. So it's tough to want to do something about it and not really be able to, because you're binded legally. I'm not sure how far it'll go as far as creating laws and things to enforce it, because that could take a bad turn. Um, as far as is this something the police should really be handling? Is this something that we really want to get involved in? We all know that relations between police and community aren't always the best anyway. So to kind of add something to that would be tough. Now, on the flip side of that, as lawmakers and as enforcers, we, our job is to protect people. And if laws need to be put in place to do that, then I think the idea would be visited. I think they would probably consider it. Whether it'll go through or not, I'm not sure. But I think it would be considered to, to kind of put some laws in place that can say, listen, if you see this, if you observe this, then we need to do something about it. Having said that, doing that would create yet another instance where then we aren't practicing social distance. That's something else that we would be arresting someone for. So it could really go either way. Do we want to put the first responders at risk for something like that? Or do we just let people, do their own thing and say, listen, if we're advising you, we're trying to educate you on what you should and should not be doing. Do we sit back and say, do what you will? Or do we kind of get involved in that? I'm not sure I have the right answer for it, but I think it probably is something that's being looked at.
There was a question that was posed that I want to pose to, I think, Andre, you'll be best to ask this question. I'm going to put it up on the screen. And they actually called you out by name. Do you think that Dr. Fawcett helped to direct the appropriate procedure for fighting this virus proactively? That he should be believed rather than the people that have no medical training?
I think when we and I try not to get into the politics of it all because then it gets really, really messy. But I think at some point we have to say to ourselves, if you have no medical knowledge, no scientific knowledge, no research knowledge, you may ought to get a little bit of coaching. That's kind of the easiest way for me to, I guess, the politically correct way to say that. I cannot tell you personally what to do, who to listen to, or how they should handle this situation. But what I can say is be vigilant about finding out information that is research based. Don't just take what someone has said or what someone has heard, because how do we know that what your loved one, I mean, my husband could walk in here and tell me something, and how do I know? He has not gone into research and science and all that good stuff.
Don't tell him that.
I know, because he knows it. Let him tell it. But I think there are certain parts of this situation that has been handled in an all right manner, but I definitely feel that there are certain things that have not been handled appropriately. So I'll leave that at that.
So, Pastor Jones, going back to you, you've been on both sides of the perspective as it relates to rescue and fighting fires. You're now on a more administrative side. Are some things differently when you get a call? Minister McCord said in their line of work, they kind of navigate it a little differently, whether it's something that requires an on present type of situation. In your field, that's not really an option. Usually, if there's a fire or a medical emergency. But what is your thought process now as it relates to you having to send firefighters out in the line of fire, so to speak? And how does that make you feel at this time?
It's definitely a different feeling. I will say that we're used to protective equipment. And I think what's happened this time, what we've done is we put questions in place at least beforehand. If you call 911, there are certain questions that are now being asked that will alert the firefighters so that they have the opportunity to be more prepared to respond to those calls, and that will minimize the amount of exposure that they're receiving. Yeah, it looks scary. You're going to see them with masks. You're going to see them with gloves. You're going to see them with Tyvek sleeves and gowns. And in some cases, depending on the severity of the call, a full Tyvek type suit. But it's for the safety of the professional. So whether we're responding to a house fire or responding to a medical call, it always requires a level of personal protective equipment. So I believe this is just another set of gear to put on. So the mindset is there that we've always got to protect ourselves, but now it's just the protection is a little different, and we're putting things in place to make sure that we can try to minimize their exposure. Something as simple as, if when you get to the call, send one person in, let them assess the situation, and let the rest of the guys know what else they need to put on so that they're prepared. So we're dealing with two different dichotomies where you have some shortages of PPE nationwide, and then you have critical people that need to be managed. So we have to make sure that we manage that in a balanced way so that we're not overdoing it, so that when the people that really needs the help can get the help.
I'm going to ask this question to all of you, but I'll let you answer it first, Kyotis. There are people sitting at home right now that's watching this. All of you guys are still working. That hasn't affected, your work status, your livelihood. There are some people that unfortunately don't have that situation, and they are upset because, let's face it, no work, it affects your economic situation. What would you say to those people that are anxious to get out of the house to work and maybe just social activities? You don't have that choice. You are essential. Many of you, even if you applied to take time off, probably would get denied. What would you say beyond the finances? What would you say to the person who say, hey, you're working, you should be happy? What would you say to those? I want everyone to answer this, but Kyotis, I will start with you first.
I would say to everyone, and I understand there's an economic side to it, but the health side comes first. And you won't be able to have money or have a place to work if you're not around to work. And right now, it's essential for us to be out, and trust me, it is essential because I will be home if I could be home. But if we don't have an economy to go back to start up, but people, if you just look at New York, you just look at what's going on in California, you look at what's going on in Detroit, look at what's going on in Illinois. There's people dying by the hundreds a day. It might not have hit your city yet at that level, but there's people dying in the hundreds, and their family cannot even memorialize them appropriately. So it's scary to go out, but then yes, there is also a job to do. There's food that needs to get on the shelves. There are people that have other illnesses that have to be taken care of. there will be looting and rioting in the streets if you did not have law enforcement to be there for you. If you did not have fire to come out and take care of you, and EMTs to take care of you. If you did those things that are essential baby food that you need that you can only get from ordering it online, and other essential things that you can get from ordering online. So it's very hard, of course, not to be able to have income coming in. But in order to get income, you have to be alive to be able to be around, have a job. So if
Yeah,
you're not
that's a good
supposed to
qualification.
be in the street, if you're not supposed to be in the street, I recommend you not to be in the street, because sometimes some people can be off, some people can't be off. But if and it's hard. There's no way you can really frame it. We all need money to survive in this world. We do. It's an essential. Money is essential. But if this is a new normal that we have to come to grips with, and preferably the government get themselves together and start getting essential aid to everyone that needs it financially.
Especially you out there worrying about a job with no life insurance, and you just that's a double negative. But anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Brandon. How would you answer that question for those that say, "Hey, you guys are working. We wish we could work, but you guys are essential." How would you respond to that?
Well, I think it's a fine line, because, like Kyotis mentioned, we do need money to survive, to pay our bills. The hope is that the government would do what they need to do to make sure that people aren't evicted and aren't out on the street because of this situation. If I could stay home and still have some kind of income, I absolutely would. I think the unique thing about my situation is, I leave home every day when I go to work, knowing that there's a chance that I may not come back because of the type of work that I do. So you always think about that. That that's a risk, and you're okay with that. Is there fear? Of course, we're human, but you learn how to get past that because you have a job to do. What's different about this is we're used to seeing we're used to having a threat that we can see, at least something we can kind of control. For there to be a threat that you literally cannot see and you don't even know that it's there is not something that we're necessarily prepared for, even mentally. So it is scary. I'm grateful that I have a job. I'm grateful that I haven't taken any losses because of it. But like Kyoto said, you got to be alive to be able to work. And I think the most important thing is health. So people that are like, oh, I wish I was able to go to work. You have to really look at what is really important. What is really important? There's just some instances where your job, yes, you need it, but at this moment, your health is more important. I think that's as simple as it gets. Your health is more important. Your job will be there, things will get better, but your health is more important. And that's really what it comes down to. There's some of us that we don't have that option. I know all of us, if we could stay home, we most likely would, but we just can't. But it's all about staying alive through this. And that's for all of us. And if you staying home means you're going to be alive, I think that outweighs, not having money or not having as much money as you're used to having.
Go ahead, Andrea. Go ahead.
I think for me, the one thing that I don't think people realize is there are some essential employees that are home. Why are they home? Because they work for private sectors. So there are physicians that I know, nurse practitioners that I know, registered nurses, nurses' aides that are all out of work because they work in private sectors. So it's not just, non-essential. There are some essential employees that just are out of work right now because private practices have had to close. Private surgical centers have had to close. There are a lot of places that are not doing the medical procedures that they would do outside of the hospital, a lot of the surgeries that would have normally happened. If it's not an emergency, it's not happening. So a lot of staff at the hospitals have been, for lack of words, furloughed off, and they work at essential places. So yes, I am grateful that I still have the opportunity to earn an income, but I promise you, I fear for my life every time I come in contact with a patient, or even every time I go into the grocery store nowadays, for that matter, because people are walking around grocery stores with gloves on, and they have no idea how disgusting that is. You are pretty much carrying germs everywhere you go. Gloves were not made to be worn in a grocery store to pick up items. So I mean, it is a very scary time for us right now. Economically, it is scary because we have no idea when this is going to come to an end. And even when it comes to an end, what do we do then? How would the economy bounce back? I mean, it's a lot to take in emotionally. And as I said earlier, there are going to be a lot of nurses and doctors that's going to need, they will have some PTSD after this, because you have no idea the things that people have had to see, the amount of hands they've had to hold while they pass away on ventilators with no family present. It is very terrifying, to say the least. So I pray all the time for everyone that have any part of being able to work or having to work during this pandemic, because no matter whether you're stocking groceries in a grocery store, a housekeeper in a hospital, or a physician in an emergency room, we're all essential, but we are still all on the front lines and have the potential to contract COVID-19. So I say to anyone that can stay home, it may not be the best, it may not be ideal, but it will save your life. Staying home right now saves lives.
Pastor Jones.
I agree. I think the biggest word that really comes to mind when I think of that is I sympathize with those of us that do have to work. When I was actually working, and I sympathize with those that don't have jobs, because I believe that it's such critical time that it's those that are essential don't want to be essential, although we love helping people, but the risk is so great. And then those that aren't essential, so to speak, or doesn't have a job right now, is going through such a critical time. I believe that it is not it isn't, we're not going through the same thing, but we're experiencing the same emotion. Every day that I had to put on my clothes and go to work, there was always in my head, whether I was working at a desk or not, do I return home? But now it's, do I return home and infect the rest of my family, infect the rest of the people that I lead? So it's no longer just about me, but it's about everybody that's connected to me. So I do sympathize with both that are on the line, those that are off the line. And I believe certainly during this time, the only thing that's going to get all of us through this, and I know we all agree, is prayer and God's protection, on Psalms 91 anointing, that's going to lead us where God will protect us. So I sympathize with both sides, and I've been on that side, and now I know what it's like to be in the house, stuck, can't leave. So that's a whole different story.
Alone and nobody can come and bring you anything. That's
right. Nobody but a dog.
Man's best friend. I have a question. I don't know anybody can answer this. It's Andrea says she stays out the political stuff, but it may be leaning more political. Do you think that the current administration would, if they would have kept the approach of the pandemic preparedness that President Obama invested in, that we would be in a better position? Without being, I guess, political about it, we do know that there was a team in place to kind of handle this, and the current administration